Hey, Three Crosses family, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Pastor AJ. I oversee life groups and discipleship, and we're so excited you're here. We have another amazing conversation in this Abide series. We're looking at John chapter 15, verses 12 through 17. We're talking about abiding in obedience. We have a great conversation in store, but before we get into that conversation, we'd love to let you know what's going on here at Three Crosses. Well, at Three Crosses, life group season has officially launched. And so if you're not connected into a life group or looking to get connected here at Three Crosses, we'd encourage you to go check out threecrosses.church/life groups to learn more. We also have a podcast survey. We'd love for you to fill out our podcast survey. Tell us who you are, where you're listening from. We'd love to give you a free gift at Neighborhood Cafe, and you can visit the podcast survey at threecrosses.church/podcast. Okay, we have an amazing conversation to get to, and so with that, let's go deep. Joining us to talk about John 15, verses 12 to 17, abiding in obedience. None other than Pastor Danny Strange. Pastor Danny, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back on your podcast.
We are in this infamous text, really, John 15. There's just a lot of great stuff going on. And we were commenting off air. It's kind of hard to ask questions about it because Jesus is just laying down the same rhythms and topics going on. And so before we get into our verses 12 to 17, we're going to walk through them. I want to begin with a context question, we always do, context question. So I was thinking about just the journey of the Abide series that we've gone on. And so I know we've talked early on about, hey, this is a preparation for diving into the wisdom of James. We want to prep people to receive this instruction from James. And you had said, we're talking about this Abide series for a particular purpose to prep us really to get into those action statements. And so I'm wondering, as you reflect on the series so far, talking about fruit that will last, talking about abiding in Jesus, abiding in his love, what is the flow that you're hoping people are seeing, that John is laying out, that Jesus is laying out in the Gospel of John? What is the flow that you hope people are seeing that leads to obedience? Because I know we talked about obedience last time we were here. We started to touch on it, and now we're in abide in obedience.
Yeah, it's interesting because Jesus in John 15 is preparing towards the cross. Mm-hmm. And so in many ways, this is the farewell discourse. This is a time in the book of John where Jesus is giving his last words to his disciples. And you would imagine he would give them a lot of marching orders, like do this when I'm gone, do that when I'm gone. Whether it's like housekeeping stuff, like don't forget to take care of the poor, or it's like big mission stuff, like go and make disciples of all nations, like Great Commission stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it's fascinating to me that he spends so much time really just grounding them in this very simple reality. And so he starts in John 13, washing their feet, and says, hey, this is what I'm going to call you to do, is to wash each other's feet. And they're like, oh, okay. That seems kind of out of left field. And now we're in this passage where it's like, hey, just stay close to me and stay in my love and listen to my words. And my words are just to love one another. And this is the new command I've given you, to love one another. And it's very interesting because it feels like it's such a small vision in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to go and your job is really just to love each other well when I'm gone. And you think, man, how is that possibly going to change the world? And yet that's part of the reason why we started this series with, like, he's actually giving this vision that we would bear lasting fruit, that there's something about this command that he gives us that's as old as time, right? Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself, right? Abide in Jesus and love your neighbor, right? Are the two commandments he brings up in John 15. But there's something powerful to transform the world in this passage that's as simple as just saying, hey, if you can stay connected with the Lord, and you could be someone who just loves others with God's love, that is going to change the world in miraculous ways. And that's what Jesus' life and ministry did. Was, Jesus did miraculous things, literal miracles, and yet really when you look back at Jesus' life, it was just a string of him loving people well. And he had a very small geographic region he lived in. Right. Most of his ministry happened within this real small radius, and he just cared for individuals. He had 12 disciples. He died, and most of them scattered. And it's like, and yet this is the most influential figure who ever lived in the history of the world. And so I think what he's giving us is this secret of living this simple life where we simply love God and love neighbor and realize that that is everything.
Mm.
And I think where that prepares us for the book of James, and we'll talk about this in the first week of James, January 9th, is that uh,
February 9th.
February 9th,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're good.
February 9th is that James is all about being single-minded
Mm.
and just not listening to the flesh inside of us, not listening to what the world tells us, not listening to the devil, not listening to all these other noise,
Mhm.
um, but just humbly receiving the word that's implanted in you, which can save your soul, and living a single-minded life out of that. And so I do think, like, abide in Jesus Christ and love your neighbor really is a real simple single way to
Mm.
live that James will start putting some more flesh on when we talk about how to do that in different contexts.
Yeah. And I think the thing I appreciated about your message was bringing out this idea of, well, that's it. Because there's just so much that we long for as humans. And I don't know where that comes from. This idea that, okay, I hear you, love God, love others. I know all the passages that describe like all the law hangs on these two things. And yet we're always looking for okay, but there's more to it, right?
Mhm.
There's evangelism. There's all these different disciplines that we get to engage in. So this temptation to want more. So I want to ask a question based on that phrase. That's it. That question.
Mm.
So verse 12. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. And so you just brought out a great explanation of this simple life of loving the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our strength, with all our mind, with everything that we are, and loving our neighbor. And yeah, Jesus reiterates that in his teachings in the gospel accounts. What do you hope our people in the 21st century, three crosses, right now, right here, right now, what do you hope they hear when they hear the word love?
Mm.
Because I know that is a huge conversation in our culture today. I want to do this, but what exactly does it look like to love? And I ask that because I think we get a clue here: love each other as I have loved you.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I think love in the scriptures is most commonly defined as acting in someone's best interest. And so it's like if you see somebody who's hurting and you slow down to talk to them, pray with them, like that's something where you're just serving that person. That's an act of love. At the same time, if you've got a kid who's misbehaving and you ground them, grounding the child could be an act of love because you're saying, "Hey, this is something that might be painful for you to not be able to go out this weekend, and yet I'm doing this because I love you
hmm,
and I want you to develop your character, and this is an act of love, even though it doesn't feel like it." So, loving it when we're talking about loving our neighbor is living in such a way that we're putting our neighbor first, that we're putting their interests before ourselves, that we're laying down our own lives so that they might experience life, vibrancy, those types of things. And so love can look a lot of different ways, but really the core of it is putting, like the golden rule, right? Treating others the way you want to be treated,
hmm,
treating all your neighbors as if they were you. Like
hmm.
what would I want in this scenario, right? And or what would I need in this scenario? Serving people selflessly.
Mm. And I know that phrase, love each other as I have loved you, that's not a unfamiliar phrase. It's like the second time we've heard this, John 13:34 to 35, which you referenced. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. I feel like it's a callback to even last week. Any feedback on like last week's conversation about this verse that as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you? It seems like this reciprocal, like, hey, as the Father has loved me, I have loved you, and now I want you to love others like I have loved you. It's like this
Mhm.
this chain of love going on.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different. We mapped last week. We mapped it the Father's love for Jesus and said that same thing is true of you, and that is true.
Right.
But it's interesting as we're talking about in this context, you almost feel like Jesus is inviting us to look back
Mm,
and just kind of reverse engineer how love has worked historically. And
mm,
so, right, we looked at, well, how did the Father love Jesus? It's like, well, but the Father is always, extolling the Son, right? Pointing towards the Son, glorifying the Son, he's chosen the Son, he's
mhm,
pleased with the Son, commissions the Son, all these things. Like
mhm,
just um, this is the whole Trinitarian dance of it
mhm,
feels like Father, Son, and Spirit all pointing at one another and saying, "No, no, it's you." Right? The Son is eternally giving glory to the Father. The Spirit is eternally giving glory to the Father and the Son. That kind of thing. And then the Son glorifies the Father through his death, resurrection, and exaltation onto the um, to the right hand of the Father. And so there's this. You just see like, wow, this is a community, right? The Trinity, the triune God, one God in three persons that extols and experiences and expresses love in such a beautiful way. So
Mm.
Jesus is like, okay, that way, like the way that Father, Son, and Spirit love each other, that's how I've loved you. And so now we, who are not the disciples, can look back at the disciples. Well, how did Jesus love the disciples? And it is like he did choose them in the same way the Father chose the Son. The disciples are chosen by Jesus. There's passages in the scriptures about that.
Mm.
He finds them in their ways of life and invites them into a new way of life. He forgives their sins like he does for us. He commissions them and trains them towards ministry. He shows them beautiful things. He reveals his plans to them. He acts in their best interest. He goes to the cross so that they might have life. Like they are believers just like us, right? And so Jesus has just devoted his life. He had one earthly life to live and 3 years of ministry life. And he decided to spend that time pouring into these 12 men. What a way to live. Like, what a loving way to live. Like, I just live for these guys. He didn't get married. He didn't have any things that divided his interests. He just loved these 12 disciples and everybody else around him too. But so it's like, wow, that's amazing. So it's like, okay, so the way the Father experiences love with the Spirit and the Son and the Trinity is a beautiful thing. The way that Jesus just devoted his life to pouring into the disciples is a beautiful thing. We like take that packet of truth and Jesus says, okay, now I want you to live that way. Like I want you to go and love people, right? And this is different in different contexts. Like the life group that my wife and I lead, we're talking about marriage right now as we're preparing for the James series. We're doing a little 3-week marriage series, and we were just talking about the Trinitarian love and how that should affect the marriage relationship of husbands and wives moving towards one another and serving one another and saying, no, it's about you. It's about you. Like, how do I find delight in putting the other person first? Like that is something we learn from the Trinity, right? And that is something we learn from seeing Jesus model. And so that's in a beautiful marriage relationship. That might be a little different than the way you love your coworker, but at the same time, right? Maybe you're not trying to create intimacy with your coworker, but you do want to serve them. You want to put them first and say, no, hey, you're in the lunch line. No, you go first, right? Just simple stuff or bigger stuff. Like, hey, you know what? Like, I'll take this project so that you can go home this weekend because I know you got a big thing with your kids, whatever. That's just all acts of love. And so Jesus is equipping us to be people who love well. And instead of giving us a definition for love, he says, let me give you a couple of contexts you can look at. One is the triune God, intra-Trinitarian love. And one is the way that I've loved my disciples. Like, go and take those models and figure out how to live that into your own life.
Yeah. It's pretty fascinating because it gives a new foundation to love. Because I think people can hear love and there's still like a selfish motivation underneath it. I'm going to love this person to see what I can get out of them. But really, you're replacing that selfish motivation with, this is like the deepest existence ever. Like, I mean, you can trace it back to the Father loving the Son and the Son loving the disciples and then the disciples loving others. It's kind of this really cool chain to think about that reverse engineering of love and where its source is from. And I think it helps the definition of like, hey, as you're looking to a culture that is confused about what love means, you can look at the Trinity, you can look at the scriptures, you can look at Jesus's life and his interactions with his disciples and determine what does it look like to truly love somebody. So I think that's awesome to think about this love chain. And I love the descriptions of how Jesus loved his disciples, because in verse 13, it brings us to one of the most awesome scriptures in all of Scripture. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And so I was thinking about a question, because this is another one of those passages that people just have memorized, And I was thinking about back in my school days of this illustration of like, you know what? I love you so much, Danny. I'm going to go drown myself now because I love you so much. And this idea that like, it's an odd way to show love by laying down your life with no purpose, right? And so the illustration is meant to show like, no, there needs to be a purpose behind laying down one's life. So before we jump into any more of these things, I think it's a helpful reminder, and this is the question I'll ask. How does Jesus laying down his life, because he's about to go to the cross, as you've been saying, how does Jesus laying down his life enable or make this whole abide concept even possible? In other words, like, how do the core gospel elements, his life, death, resurrection, ascension, and eventual return, how does it make it possible for us to even abide in the first place?
Wow.
It's a big question.
I
Yeah.
think on one hand, the life, ministry, death, resurrection of Jesus gives us a model. And
Okay.
so Jesus doesn't merely say, greater love has no one than this, then he lays down his life for his friends, but Jesus then goes and lays down his life for his literal friends.
Right.
And so it's like, oh wow, he meant that literally. Like that's a beautiful model. I think at the same time, as I was thinking through what it might look like to experience love at that great level, I do think in many ways, the type of love that Jesus is advocating in its most extreme forms, I think it'd be really difficult to love people that way if we weren't transformed by the gospel.
Hmm.
Right? So like lay down your life for your friends, right? On one hand, that's something we just say. I think it was
Yeah.
is it Bruno Mars who has that song of like, I'd step in front of a train for you, like, like all these things, like, yeah, that's like in love poetry. That's how we describe, I love you so much. Like I
Yeah.
would go to space and
I
die without oxygen
jump
for
in
you.
front of a bullet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well, that's extreme. Please don't do that. Um, but the reason that kind of overflows out of our mouth is because that is the most grandiose gesture of love, is being willing to die. And I think
Huh.
dying for someone in a moment is beautiful, right? This idea of like you run out and push someone who's about to get hit by a car, then you get hit by a car. It's like that's just this impulse that like, wow, like love propels you to do that. I think it gets even harder though when it's premeditated, right? Which I think is pretty rare. But
Hmm.
so I was thinking about this when you were talking about Jesus' love.
Sure.
Is imagine a world where it's like your spouse like needs a kidney or something, and um and you're like, okay, well, I might die in this surgery. So no, right? I'm not going to give you the kidney, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, no husband who loves their wife would say no. Like that's like the most selfish thing ever. Now you take it to like a next extreme. Like I remember this kind of sad but funny story of a very similar thing where a child was willing to give their kidney to a relative, and they're like thought about it, like I'll do it. Like I want to give my kidney to my relative, and the doctor's like, okay, well here's how it's going to work. You're going to go into surgery. We're going to remove your kidney, and we're going to put it into your relative's body, and then they're going to be able to be healed of this disease. And the child says, okay, I'm ready to do it. And and then the child asks a question like, when I wake up from the surgery, am I going to be in heaven with God?
Hmm.
And the surgeon's like, what do you mean? And they realize like, oh, the child thought they were going to die. Like they thought giving their kidney away was like literally giving their life, and they decided to do it, right? Like that's
Mm.
like that, like I said, rarely happens, but it's like, what a gesture of love to be willing to say, you know what, I'll die so that you can live. And I think even though that probably rarely happens, I think as a Christian person, if I ever faced that, where it's like someone, even if it was like an acquaintance or somebody that I never met, and it's like God comes to me and says, Danny, would you be willing to die so that this person could live? I would know in my heart the right answer is yes,
Hmm.
just because that's what you're supposed to do. Like
Hmm.
Christians lay down their lives, not just for their friends. Like Jesus, while we were still sinners, died for us.
Hmm.
And again, I don't think that's ever going to happen, but that is what the gospel invites us into, is a type of loving people so deeply that like if that question ever came up, it's like as a Christian, the answer is always yes. So in the same way, if there's an opportunity to die for my faith, or if someone says you need to recant Jesus or we're going to kill you, like I will always, like I would hope, like, and I should always say, I'm never going to recant Jesus. I believe in Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. You can kill me if you want to. Like that's the right thing to do in that moment. That's what we've been equipped for this, right? And we've been equipped for this through the gospel. And so, you can be a good person without being a Christian person. And yet I do think as a Christian, seeing this model lived out in the gospel of the way that Jesus loved does make it so that in these points of life where we get a choice, if we really humbly think about it, the choice is always love. Like it's never like, well, yeah, but who cares about them, right? It's always like, of course, if it's me sacrificing, but it helps them, of course. Like that's, and I'm sure there's times where the answer is no, but that's what I think about as you talk through that. On one hand, we get a model in the gospel. On the other hand, something about living as Christians who have embraced the gospel. The answer is yes when it comes to love every time, because the answer was yes for Jesus at the ultimate sense when it came to love.
Yeah. I suppose the tension, even in my heart, as you're outlining that scenario, I was like, oh man, I don't want to do this. And so I wonder, like, if the gospel the fact that the Holy Spirit resides in you, like empowers you to be able to say yes in a lot of ways. Because going back to double-mindedness, every flesh bone in my body wants to run away from that scenario and preserve my life. But then, yeah, I mean, how do these things happen? It's almost like you have to remain in the one that led the way through this,
Well,
the
and I
Spirit
do
of
think
God.
that, and there's no like magic formula to life or anything, but
Right.
I do think when we're walking with the Lord and we're mindful of what his commands are
Mhm.
and that his commands really all boil down to just abiding in Jesus and loving our brothers and sisters, loving our neighbors ourselves. It it's not that hard.
Mm.
The other day my wife and I were out in Berkeley and kind of
Mhm.
walking down the street, getting a coffee or something, and like as I got out of the car, I realized like I had $5 in my pocket, which like I never have cash. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. There's $5 in my jeans.
Mm.
And we're walking down the street, and this person was sitting outside the coffee shop. They're like, "Hey, excuse me, like, do you have any extra cash? Like, I'd really love to get some food, whatever." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I actually have $5 in my pocket. Like, it must be for you, Like, and I didn't say it like that, but I'm just
Yeah.
thinking like, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
this magically appeared in my pocket, and then this person asked for it, and like, well, yeah, like God wanted to get this person a bagel, and so he put money in my pocket so that when they asked me, there'd be something to hand to them,
Mm. Mhm.
and it wasn't like difficult and it wasn't like weird or showy or anything. It was almost like this crazy thing of like somebody saying like, "Hey, do you have a pencil?" I'm like, "Yeah, actually I do,"
Mm.
But
Mhm.
just kind of, it was almost like one of those moments in the scriptures where like, "Hey, the Lord needs this." Like, "Oh, here it is."
Mm.
And so obviously when things get bigger and more grandiose or complicated, like it's more complicated. But I do think most of life is just choosing love all the time.
Mm.
You asked that question, like, is that it? I mean, I know I asked that question in the sermon, but like, is that it? And on the one hand, no, it's not it. Like most of our life is not this. Most of our life is going to work and feeding our kids and putting them to bed and, taking a shower. Like
Mhm.
that's most of our life. But love is something that controls us wherever we go. Right? Like that's even in the midst of putting our kids to bed or going to work or getting ready. Like love compels us in those moments. And so I was even thinking about when you were saying that, I was thinking about today, I'm working on stuff here at work and plugging away at my computer. And I came out of my office and, a pastor, a church planter in our area that used to work on our staff here, Max, walked by and I'm like, "Oh, Max is here," and talked to Max for a second. And then a couple from our church walked by. I'm like, "Oh, Don, Leah, hey, how you guys doing?" I got to chat with them for a little bit. And
Mhm.
then I saw Charles Homer, who worked here for a long time, and say, "Hey, Charles, how you doing?" Connect with him. And I'll just, it didn't feel like I was like serving the Lord, but it just felt like a joy for me to take a break from what I'm doing to just like love people that I just bumped into,
Mm.
and just have a quick
Mhm.
conversation and, "Hey, how you doing?"
Mhm.
Anything you need, whatever. And and I really just thought like, this is the secret of life. It's just like
Mm.
being like a person who like, of course, like you got stuff to do. We all got stuff to do. But like so often we're so busy with all the stuff we've decided we have to get done in this certain time frame
Mm.
that somebody walks by and we just kind of like put our head down, or like
Mhm.
the phone rings and we send it to voicemail, or, and again, there's probably times to send it to voicemail, but um, I love being in seasons where I'm interruptible enough that I can love people. Because I do
Mm.
think that's kind of what Jesus is saying is like, if the love of Christ controls and compels you at all times, then no matter what you're doing, you can actually be serving the Lord. He'll send people your way who need to be loved, and you can just love them
Mm.
and get back to work, or
Yeah.
whatever. So, I think that's where it kind of comes back to these, these ancient, or not even ancient. I think of Dallas Willard, like a more modern philosopher who said, always talked about like you need to relentlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Like hurry
Mhm.
is the enemy of spirituality, because when we hurry, like we talked about last week on the podcast, it just clamps us down from loving people, and
Mm.
that's all we're supposed to do is love people.
Mm. Let's talk about a phrase here that I know in conversations on the sermon review team we spent a lot of time on, which was this use of the word friends.
Mm.
So greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And then in verse 14 it says, "You are my friends if you do what I command." And just going through scripture, seeing when does God or Jesus call anybody friends? Pretty rare. So Abraham gets called a friend. Moses gets called a friend. Lazarus gets called a friend in the same book, John 11. And so it seems like this is a pretty powerful moment. But I wonder if a lot of us hear this and we're kind of numb to it because maybe we have a different view of friendship, or maybe the deepest we've ever thought about friends is the TV show, so I know you did a deep dive on friendship. So could you unpack what would a first century person hear when they heard this term friends, and why do you think it's so significant, especially in our day and age where a lot of people don't have too many friends?
Yeah, I think they would think two things, or maybe at two layers. I think the first layer is they would just think about friendship in a similar way to what we do,
Sure.
right? But with a bit of a difference. Like I think for us, the way we use friends and language in our culture is really more like acquaintances.
Mhm.
Like, oh, this is somebody that I know them, they know me, we have our cell phone numbers, like we'll text every once in a while, like we're friends. In the first century, this idea of a friendship was something that's like it's hard to find, right? Like even in the Proverbs, more of an ancient book, the writer of Proverbs says there is a friend that sticks closer to a brother. Like it's like this holy grail. Like you can find it. Right? David and Jonathan
Mm.
found this friendship, Or you read authors from 17th, 18th century authors, and they talk about like these people exchanging letters, these pen pals, like, oh, I think I found like my soulmate friend kind of thing. It's like, what is this friend they found? It's
Mm.
like, it's just somebody. And really, it kind of becomes a lot of things, right? And so in first century, like Aristotelian friendship, based like Aristotle the philosopher, like friendship is about camaraderie, like I got your back, like I'm going to support you, I'm going to stand up for you, kind of like our ride or die concept today. There's the sacrifice, kind of the greatest act of love, like Jesus said, is you lay down your life for your friends.
Mm.
This is someone that like one another, you trust one another, right? Like David and Jonathan enter into a covenant relationship with one another. Hey, I got your back, you got my back. Like it's like this partnership where it's almost like you've become family with someone who's not in your family. You've chosen to enter into a covenant relationship with someone.
Mm.
It's like this deep thing. So I think that's one layer is like, wow, like that's a deep thing that Jesus would call us friends. I think part of it is when you look at those biblical cases, like the Abraham, the Moses, there is something in the scriptures that when God calls people friends, he's mostly talking about revealing his plan to them. Right? That's what
Mm.
makes them a friend as
Mhm.
opposed to somebody else who might not be a friend of God or something, is like,
Right.
is God shows Abraham, like he kind of pulls back the curtain and says, you're going to have this many offspring and I'm going to use you in these ways. And they wrestle through stuff, right? Moses got to see God face to face. And
Mhm.
Moses wrestled for that and said, God, I want to see you, right? So he sees his back. Then he goes up on the mountain. Moses' face is shining because he actually got to behold the glory of God. He like got behind the curtain,
Mhm.
a place that no one else got to go.
Right.
And so there's this exclusive access level where you can kind of come and go. And so I think that's part of when God calls people friends. And this is what Jesus says in this passage, like, hey, I'm revealing to you my plan. Like you can see my cards. Like I'm not just this like figure in the distance that you just like worship. I also am opening up like salvation history to you so you can see what my plans are.
Mm.
And and so I think on one hand, that's beautiful. Friendship is beautiful. Second layer, I think, is we have to remember that it's remarkable that Jesus would call us friends because
Mm.
Jesus is way more famous than we are, right? and,
Right.
and so I had a seminary professor who noted, and I think it's significant, that there's no time in the scriptures where we call God friend, but in the
Mm.
scriptures over and over, there are times where God calls us friends. So it's like let's be humble. Like God and I aren't buddies. It's not
Mhm.
like that. Like He's God, I'm me, right? We're still servants. That's part of the subtext of this passage, that we are servants of God. But Jesus says, I don't just call you servants, though I call you friends, even though we are servants. And so, like,
Mhm.
we are servants of God. So we don't walk into the palace and fist bump Jesus, be like, what's up? Like, plop down on his throne. We're not that kind of friends. We're not going through God's refrigerator. Like, we are people who are humble to think this is the king of the universe. This is the most glorious being that's ever existed. And he knows my name and he invites me into his presence at like whenever I want. And so there's a reverence there, but there's this awe there and God reveals his plan to me. I get to know what we're partnering together in some way. This is crazy. It's like,
Mm.
if like pinch me, like it kind of feels like we're friends, right? It's like, and I know we're not, right? Because God is God and I'm just a human, but like, man, he like really opens up every aspect of his life to me and
Mm.
treats me like I'm one of his inner circle, even though I know I'm just a person, And so I think that's part of that wrestling match of like, and that's what I tried to walk through in the sermon, like even where Jesus does in this passage of like, I no longer call you servants, but friends. We're still servants. And obedience to my command is what makes you friends. It's like, that's not what makes you and I friends. I wouldn't say
Mhm.
like, hey, AJ, like we'll keep being friends if you obey my commands. It's like, that's not friendship. But when it comes to like friendship with the God of the universe, yeah, it's like, hey, like this part of it is like friendship is having each other's back, and having God's back is obeying his commands, like not being like
Right.
a
Mm.
mutinous person in his kingdom, but
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm going to live out your ways, live out the values of your kingdom and to the best of my ability. And God's like, well, hey, I'm going to vulnerably open up access to you of these things in my books and all that. So, yeah, I think on one hand, friendship is this beautiful thing that we all want companions. It's a deeper thing in that sense of like service, sacrifice, laying down one's life. And then I think when it comes to us and God, I think there's also a humbling part of like, he calls us friends. Like, I don't want to say we're not friends, but we're not friends. Jesus and I aren't friends in the same way that me and my friends are friends. It's
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
he's Jesus. And so it's like, I'm always going to have this, like, someday when I meet him in eternity, my first posture is not running up and high fiving him.
What's
It's
up?
laying on my face before him,
Right.
right? Where
Right.
every knee will bow, every tongue will confess Jesus Christ is not friend, but Lord.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of this passage is that the Lord of all creation calls us friend, but he doesn't cease being the Lord of all creation.
Mm.
So I hope that doesn't like cheapen it I think that actually makes it richer, but like let's know our place in creation here,
Yeah.
and recognize that that's what makes this line so significant.
Yeah. And I know we talked a little bit about the obedience to the commands part because we talked about sort of like the master teacher inviting you into his lifestyle and saying like, if you just obey, like this is gonna go well for you. And there's love to that. I want to talk about that concept of revealing,
Mhm.
because Abraham, Moses, you're right, there's a revelation going on, a unveiling of the plans that God is going to unfold. And right here in verse 15, you refer to it, I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my father, I have made known to you. That's verse 15 there. And, in the sense of revelation of peeling back the curtain, we get master's business and everything that I learned from my father, I have made known to you. Could you talk more about like what that looks like as you're walking in friendship, in God's friendship toward us, in us with this complicated, like you're our master, but you've called us friends. What does it look like when God is revealing his quote unquote business? Like,
Mm.
what is his business here? And everything that I've learned from the Father, like, does that mean everything?
Mm.
Really?
Well, I think part of it is like Jesus is in the transformation business, like the
Mhm.
world, not just the transforming the East Bay business, like the transforming the world business in every
Yeah.
way. And so I do think, and that's where there is this like dotted line thing of like there is some sort of real friendship there, but it's different because like Jesus is so next to level, right?
Right.
So like, um, yeah. So it was Moses, Abraham. You mentioned Lazarus. Lazarus is feels like more of just like a normal friend of Jesus,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
not the same as Moses and Abraham, where
Like,
God like
yeah.
reveals His plan to him. Lazarus is just like seems like his buddy. Like he dies and Jesus
Yeah.
goes to pay his respects and starts crying. It's like my friend is dead. Like I
Mm,
think they're literal friends, and
mm,
I think in with the disciples, there's an aspect that as he walked with him on earth, they're literal friends. Like they live life together, they shared things together. Like and Jesus in his incarnation, right, puts off these some of these incommunicable attributes that he doesn't share with us of his like grandeur and his omnipresence and
mhm,
all of that, his majesty at some level where it's like he's approachable in a different way and
mhm.
so has more like human friendships. And so anyways, what I'm thinking about is as we talk about what does it mean that God reveals his business to us? It's like, okay, well, now Jesus is glorified. He's
Mhm.
at the right hand of the Father, and he's looking out upon the world and he's transforming it. He has this vision that he gives us in the kingdom parables of how this one grain that falls to the ground and dies himself bears much fruit. And it's like this wheat field that expands over the entire earth. He's got this plan to transform everything. And this is where it comes back to like, so now this is his business. Like this is what him and the Father and the Spirit are all about, is like transforming the world.
Mhm.
And like, I think that's where this friendship comes in. It's like, it's a different type of friendship than like me and you, but it's
Sure.
like, that's what he's doing. And so he like taps us on the shoulder, his people. And it's like, hey, go talk to that person. Or hey, check your pocket. There's $5 in there or whatever it is. Like,
Right.
um, he's like, hey, I'm gonna like, do you want to help? Like we're transforming the world. Do you want to come with us? And like, we'll just tell you what to do and you do it. And like, we'll do it together. Right. It's kind of this idea of like this partnership aspect we talked about last week. And there's something like really cool and beautiful about that, where it's like, on one hand, we're not like friends. Like we don't go up into the throne room with the Father, Son, and Spirit. And we're like, hey, we belong here too. Like we're all the same. But it's like, he's like, hey, we're doing a real cool thing. You want to do it with us. Right. And so Jesus is not a celebrity, but at the same time, it's like, just imagine, it's like if you're, Steph Curry hits you up and you're like, how did you get my number? He's like, oh, hey man, like, just want to say what's up. It's like, hey, a few of us are going down to like play, grab some dinner, play some pickup basketball. Like, you want to come with us, right? Like, are you serious? Right? Like, you're inviting me into that, right? And so it's like, or like we're gonna do a workout, we're going to practice, whatever, right? And so you go to dinner and you're like, how am I even here, right? Then you go to practice and like, they're practicing, they're NBA All-Stars and you're just like a guy, but it's like they let you shoot a couple hoops too, and it's like, how are they letting me participate? Like this is crazy, right? There's something to like, that's kind of what Jesus is tapping into here. Is like, he is other from us. He is like overseeing all the universe and transforming this world, but he's chosen to do it, like inviting us along, and he's like giving us the ball and say, hey, you shoot this one. And then it goes in because he makes it go in. And he's like, oh, look what you did. You're like, you kind of did that. It's like, oh, whatever, it's just like this, there's this invitation into his business. And so it's like Jesus, I was going to say in his posse, the Trinity is not a posse. Jesus, the Son, the Father, and the Spirit are in the business of transforming the entire world towards the image of God as we move towards the kingdom. And he invites us into that in some way and like kind of, calls us up. And so that's, you look back at all these passages in the New Testament about walking with the Spirit, being filled with the Spirit, not quenching the Spirit, right? Quenching the Spirit is like when Jesus calls and you just send it to voicemail, right? It's like the Spirit wanted to invite you to something cool and you just said no, right? Like, we're friends, man. I'm going to give you stuff to do that's not just like do my laundry, not that type of stuff to do, but I'm going to like put the ball in your hand and say like, hey, this is what we do. Like, now you do it this time. There's an apprenticeship like we talked about last week. So anyway, I think that's the business that I imagine. And so it's again, there's a humility in it because we're just us, but it is like, yeah, you imagine that world where, if Steph Curry was deity and he had the ability to do the things that Jesus did,
right?
Steph Curry could be like, hey, tonight I want you to start like in my place and like, trust me, just trust me. And every time you like shoot the ball, it goes in and you like look over and he like winks at you, right? It's just like, he can do that if you want to, if he's deity, right? And so there's something to that, like Jesus' business is not sports. Jesus' business is transforming the world, but it's that same thing of like, he invites us into his work and he does that, say, hey, why don't you go out on the field? It's like, what? Like, Peter's like, I'm supposed to get in front of all these people and share the gospel. Just trust me, just do it, right? He gets up there, shares the gospel. 3,000 people get saved. He's like, how did 3,000 people just get saved, right? Or like Paul's in prison and is it Paul who's in prison? No, Peter's in prison. Peter's in prison and people are praying and Jesus is like, check this out, right? And opens the like prison door and tells Paul, but just sit right there, right? So Paul just like sits there and then the jailer's about to kill himself and Paul like stands up, like, no, to kill yourself, like we're all here. It's like, what's about to happen? It's like Jesus is orchestrating something really cool and somehow he's like swept you right into the middle of it. It's like, hey, let's do this together, right? And so read the book of Acts through the lens of Jesus is doing something really cool and he uses humans in it, and you'll kind of get a glimpse of what I'm talking about.
I love that. The master's business. I'm interested in that last line there. I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Is that like reiterating the same thing? Is that like information because it's like something that he's learned and now he's passing it on to us? Like, is there anything else that's going on in the revelation of this?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't studied that.
Okay.
I wouldn't look too deeply into it because I don't imagine a world where Jesus like sitting before the Father and the Father's like, no, let me teach you about whatever.
Right.
Feels more like this word learned is not like he went to school.
Right.
But it's more like the Father revealed his plan to Jesus.
Got it.
Now Jesus revealed his plan to us. And so Jesus teaches things. But I think he's probably talking more about, hey, this stuff that I'm teaching you, like this is stuff that the Father's revealed to me, and there's some level of, like when it's, hey, when's Jesus coming back? It's like, Jesus, like actually no one knows except for the Father. Like there are some things that the Father has not revealed. So it's like, there's this different function within the Trinity. So So I think Jesus is giving the opposite use case here, where he's saying,
Gotcha.
"Hey, whatever the Father has revealed to me, like I just pass it along. Like that's why I call you friends. Like I'm an open book. Like you can ask me stuff, right? Where it's like if you and I aren't friends and you ask me some personal question, I'll be like, hey man, well that's none of your business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if we're friends, you can know my business. Like that's what Jesus is talking about. You know the master's business. So
Right.
there it is.
I love the club analogy that you used, the club story.
Oh my gosh, I could
up the
still
pulley.
see that. The club was so cool too, because it's like I didn't get into this, but they had a 2-tier deck,
Okay.
and so like the bottom deck was real long, and the top deck was over it, and so then they just dropped down like and put a sliding glass door like between the top deck and the bottom deck because it enclosed this cool like fort space under their deck. So it was like a
Whoa.
legit outdoor fort, and it was just so cool. Like it was like a clubhouse, but it was built into their deck. It was so cool.
Yeah, just the concept of thinking like you're in the club, like you get to know the master's business. You get in on this, on the action. It's just like, oh
Yeah.
man, that's a really cool thought.
And I will say too, at 9 years old, like that little pulley system to like pass notes, like with a clothespin from their house to our house, was the coolest invention of all time.
It's pretty innovative. Yeah, I would agree.
It was very cool.
Well, we're about 2 verses away from being done here. We get to a very familiar verse, which is verse 16, where this all started. And so, verse 16, I'll read it. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. And so, if you didn't listen to our episode to kick off the series, it's called Fruit That Will Last. Go check it out. Go listen to it. We break down this passage verse or kind of word by word, phrase by phrase. But yeah, we talked about a lot of things in that episode. We talked about the importance of Jesus being the one that chooses first. We talked about the combination here of being chosen and then appointed or set aside. We talked about that, the significance of that. We talked about defining fruit. We talked about what it means to define fruit, not circumstantially, but in this mindset of you have this eternal existence. And so like define fruit by what's going to contribute to that. And then finally, we talked about the landing place, so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This relationship of walking alongside Jesus, of praying, and then the Father giving, and this like reciprocal relationship going on. I'm wondering, take all that information, download it. How does this friendship conversation, now that we have the context a little bit more, how does this club analogy, this friendship language that Jesus is using, how does that inform this passage now that we're doubling down on this and revisiting this?
Yeah, I think it is. You go into the clubhouse, and if you missed the sermon, you should listen to it. But I just told a story
Right.
about my neighbors inviting me to join their club, which was an exclusive club that just included the two of them, our neighbors. And so I'm like, I'm joining the club. So I joined the club. And if you've ever joined a club, I mean, you can imagine joining a club like this. It's like one of the questions is like, well, what do we do in this club? Right? It's like we're in now, but like, what do we do? And I feel like this verse that you're mentioning is the answer to that question.
Okay.
Of like, okay, now you're an insider. I reveal my plans to you. I've laid down my life for you to create this relationship. Like, I'm going to reveal everything to you. You're like, okay,
What is it?
what is it? Like, what are we going to do? And right. And so that's where it's like, well, I've chosen you and I've appointed you that you might go and bear lasting fruit. And so like with this vine analogy, it's like, you're going to cling on to me, and through you, I'm going to do things that last forever. It's like, oh, what is that? Right. And so that's where all that stuff comes up, like, hey, let's go. Right. So it's, as you go, make disciples of all nations. And we see that is the book of Acts is the best place to see what this looks like, because you get to see it lived out in real life. And so it's right. Like Philip's walking down the street and runs into a guy who's reading the Bible, and he gets to lead him to Christ, right? Peter like stands up on Pentecost because everyone's speaking these crazy languages, and he just like says, well, let me tell you what's happening, and everybody gets saved, right? Like Luke and John are going to the temple at the time of prayer, and they run into this person who's begging for money, and they just feel compelled to say, you know what? Actually, I'm going to heal you of your inability to walk, right? It's like, This is bonkers stuff. We talked about the jailers. We think of Paul going on this ship. He's like, I'm going to Rome because I'm going to share the gospel to the ends of the earth. And then there's a ship wreck. It's like, I guess we're going to die here. And then he stops everyone. He's like, no, God told me we're going to stay alive. And then they live. And then they go onto the dry land. And then the viper grabs his wrist and he's like, I'm fine. Right. It's like, this is crazy stuff, right? It's like, they're just on this adventure with God to go and bring transformation to the ends of the earth. And they just walk. I mean, most of the time, all these stories I'm telling, they're just kind of walking down the road, And then opportunities emerge, right?
Mhm,
Walking down
mhm.
the road and this chariot pulls up. Walking down the road and everybody starts, I mean, they were praying at that point, but everyone starts speaking in tongues. They're like sitting in prison and the door opens. Like, so God is initiating even then, right? And
Mm.
so there's just something beautiful about like, I don't know if this is a good analogy. I'm going to use it anyway. Like it's almost like we become these like sleeper agents or something where like God's
Nice.
like, hey, you're one of mine now. Just trust me. Just live your life. And I'm going to bring some stuff your way and you'll see when it
Mm.
happens. Right. And so then you're like, what? Then you're at Starbucks and the barista's like, man, I just having such a hard time. And God's like, hey, you should pray for him. You're like, what? Like, but it's like, this is your, and then the voice comes in your intercom, like, this is your moment. Pray for this person. Right. So there's some level of adventure that I sense here where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, you're on this inside club and I've appointed you not merely to sit at my feet, although that's part of it, abiding in Jesus, but to go. And as you go into the world to bear lasting fruit, like, well, how do we do it? It's like, just walk with my spirit. You'll see it'll all work out.
Mm.
Right.
Let me pose a skeptic question to that.
Oh man, a
Because
skeptic. You can't be skeptical of that. That's just awesome.
I know. I wonder how many people look at the book of Acts and think it's almost like an ideal,
Mm.
and they're looking at it and like, man, that is not my life. Like, I don't feel like I'm an adventure at all. I feel like there's just a trial after trial in my life. And it feels like I'm following Jesus. It feels like I'm with him, but man, it would be really cool to have some of those experiences. It'd be really cool to find $5 in my pocket and be able to be like, oh, there's somebody that needed $5. What would you say to that person that feels like they're in the club, but this isn't the adventure that they're experiencing?
Yeah, I'd say two things. First, I would say you're right. The book of Acts feels like adventure concentrate, right? So
Mm.
it's like, I don't think it rarely happens as like explosively and crazily as the book of Acts, but I think that's where you kind of get this prototype of like, wait, this is the type of stuff we're talking about here, right? And yet I think in most of life, that there are moments every day where God is
Mhm.
using us to bring his presence into people's lives. And it might not feel as miraculous, but it's like these small deposits, right? So
Mm.
if the book of Acts is like these $1 million miracles, my life doesn't have a lot of $1 million miracles, but
Right.
my day today probably had like 4 $5 miracles, where it's like, and I don't know, right? And
Sure.
with a
Yeah,
$5
yeah.
miracle, you don't know. Like, I don't know if
And that
stopping and
compound.
talking to that couple was meaningful to them. I don't know if it was like I said something in this meeting with this guy that is going to change the way he thinks for the rest of his life. Like, I don't know. Like, and so I think that's part of it. There's an aspect of faith. Like, I'm just trying to pour out God's love to everyone that I meet, and I hope he's doing this. I don't know all the time. I'm trusting he's doing something as part of it.
Mhm.
And so I would say to the skeptic, part of it is just trusting that as you surrender your life to the Lord and live on his mission, it's like, yeah, you might not like have a snake bite your hand, but
Right.
like you might share some wisdom with someone that you don't even know that it was that wise, but someday you might find out, or we'll never find out, that it actually impacted their life in a beautiful way. So a lot of that is
Mm.
perspective, and trusting that God is working through me even when I don't get to know about it. The second thing I would say is that it is a matter of perspective. And so if you're a skeptic, you'll still be skeptical after I say this, but like there are plenty of days where I'm walking down the street and I've got $5 in my pocket and somebody says, "Can I have some money?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sorry, I don't have any money." You're right.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
like, I think the thing that was different on that day was there was just something in me that was like, "Oh, yeah, I have money for you. God has given me money to give." I was wondering why that money was in my pocket, right? It's like,
Mm.
and so part of it is just perspective. Like you can say, well, Danny, that money was just in your pocket because you left it in your pocket the last time you wore those jeans. It had nothing to do with Jesus. Like, okay, well, that's your perspective. My perspective is I don't think it magically appeared. I think that probably happened,
Sure.
but I think God is sovereign enough that that probably happened because he wanted to get that $5 to that person, and so
Mm.
I think a lot of it is just that perspective of if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" Like
Mhm.
you're thinking, "Ooh, here's an opportunity to love someone well." Or you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, what do you want? Like, I'm so busy." Right. And so
Mhm.
I just think there's an aspect that our perspective does matter. And when we trust the Lord and we know that he can work this way and we trust that he will bring us opportunities, we start to see these opportunities as opportunities, not as distractions or annoyances or interruptions, right? That's like
Mhm.
Paul says this in Second Corinthians, like he says, we just don't see people through an earthly point of view anymore. Like we see through different lenses now
Mm,
because the love of Christ compels us. We just see opportunity everywhere, right?
mm,
We see people in Christ or not in Christ and their need for the gospel. We just see differently. And I do think to the skeptic, I'd say as a Christian, I just see the world differently. And you might say I'm making it up, but I say I'm not. So we could disagree on that. But like, I think when you see the world differently, you step into these things and you start to sense like, you know, most of the time giving $5 to someone asking for change just feels like a nice thing to do. For me that day, it felt like a miracle. It's like,
mm.
so I don't know if it was more miraculous that day than a normal day or if I was just more in tune with what God was trying to do. But um I it's not just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
It's being in tune that God actually does want to invite you into his business and open your eyes because these people God's sending your way, he's sending your way for a reason. So
Yeah.
you might not know what it is, but when in doubt, love people and who knows what that'll do.
Yeah. It does feel like it's one of the culminating ideas of this Abide series, because, yeah, the perspective shift happens when you are remaining in Jesus and understanding who the source is of all these things.
Mhm.
And I can easily see how you could drift away from that. And so the call remains to remain, to abide, and then recognizing who the leader of the club is. I think that's something that clicked for me as you were talking of like, Jesus is the Lord of the universe, and he is able to operate things almost like Steph Curry magically making the shot go in.
Mhm.
He is the one that is operating so that a $5 bill in your pocket that maybe you left could impact somebody's eternal existence,
Mhm.
which is fascinating. Fascinating. What a fascinating club to be a part of.
I mean, it should be like the tension I try to walk through in the sermon, try to walk into today is it should be one of those clubs that the whole time we're looking around thinking like, is this for real? Like,
Right.
are we really like allowed to be here? And is he really going to use us in some way? Like this can't, why would he spend time with us? Like he chose, like all these parables of like highways and byways and like who gets invited to the banquet. It's all like the least of these people like us. Like he could have surrounded himself with much better people than us. Like why am I here? Right. Should be
Yeah.
a humbling question that you ask. And really, I mean, Jesus' response is like, cause I chose you. Like I
Mm,
wanted you here. Like, and he sees us, right? And there's something
mhm,
beautiful about that.
mhm. Well, verse 17 ends it like it began, saying, "This is my command, love each other." That's it. Love each other. But hopefully this whole episode has given you a new perspective on what that means and what that looks like. And I want to end practical here because I'm still imagining the person that is out there that feels lonely. Like, how can I love somebody or love each other? How can I fulfill that command if I don't really know anybody?
Mhm.
So I'm thinking like a great question to end this is, okay, you're presumably you're out there, you're a believer in Jesus. Maybe um, your life hasn't felt like an adventure, and maybe you're having a hard time. Like, how do I love people? What's a great place to start in this adventure of loving people? What would you recommend people do with this idea that we are in this club, that we are being revealed the master's business? Like, what do we do with that?
Mm. Yeah, I would say, especially to that loneliness. I think I've been in seasons of life where I'm like, I just, I would hear a podcast like this and be like, I just wish somebody would love me that way, right? Like,
Mm,
I wish someone would reach out to me or ask me how I'm doing, or
yeah.
no one ever does. And unfortunately, just the nature of things, like you can't control that. You can't control if people are caring, loving towards you. But part of what's beautiful about this passage is that the command is for us to go do that for others, to make someone else's day, to love somebody else, right? And so,
Mm,
um, even if you don't have some tight circle of friends, if you're like, man, I'm kind of a lone ranger, it's just me in my apartment, and I go to church, I come home, like, who do I get to love? It's like there. Part of it is just asking God to open your eyes to see the people every day that you interact with as people to love,
mm,
and trusting that He's like, hey, I want to invite you into this mission. And it starts simple, right? I mean, part of it's just like patterns, right? You go to the same coffee shop every morning on your way to work or getting off BART or whatever. And it's like you start to, hey, how's your day going? Get to know, you start to build a relationship just with the people who are there. Um, Part of it is just like one offs, right? Like You see somebody at work, you're like, "Hey, how was your weekends?" Take an extra time to talk to them and ask them about their like, expecting nothing in return, right? I think that's a great way to love people, even if you don't have a ton of friends. I also think that's a great way to make a bunch of friends because,
Sure.
like, most people don't have people who are caring about them, and so when you become the person who's caring about them, um, all of a sudden, it's like they're gonna naturally start sometimes, not all the time, to start asking, "Well, hey, how was your weekend? And what are you working on? And hey, we should grab, lunch sometime or whatever," you know? So I do think if you're looking to make friends, start with loving people and just see who reciprocates at some level where it's like, "I like this person. I wanna spend more time with them," right?
Mm.
And I would say the second thing to do, and this is gonna feel counterintuitive or weird, but second thing to do, I think, is just to figure out how to simplify your life.
Mm.
Like, I think if you wake up in the morning and you've got this attitude, like, "I got 100 things to do today," you're not gonna love anybody.
Mm.
Like, you're just gonna be so frazzled. You're hustling, rushing.
Mhm.
Somebody's gonna come across your path and you're like, "This is a distraction. I have no time. They're a speed bump in my day. They're not,
Yep.
a detour to love." Um, and I think for me personally, that's the the times in my life, the seasons in my life where I'm the best at loving people are the seasons where I've done the hard work to plan out what what is the simple thing that God wants me to accomplish in this season, and what are the other things that they can wait, right? And
Mm.
so it's like, so this week I got out of town, just did a 24-hour prayer retreat, and the whole purpose of this prayer retreat was just to focus on the Lord and really just say, God, what are for the next 30 days? What is the minimum in the sense of what you want me to accomplish, right? Like, and so I walked away with like, okay, here's the two things that I hope I can make some progress with in the next 30 days. And I spent a bunch of time, like calendar and stuff out, like I'm organized and like getting everything planned out of what I want to accomplish and when and how to set up the meetings and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah, like at work, at home, all that. But then once it's all set up, it's like, okay, that's actually doable. I can do this. And so like, I can't tell you how much that changed I come back to work like the end of the 24 hours and I just feel like a different person.
Mm.
Like somebody comes up to the hallway and I'm going to stop and talk to him because I'm not like, oh, I have a bunch of stuff to do. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I have one thing to do today and I got plenty of time to do it, or I already did it, and now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, there's always more stuff to do. Right. But there's some freedom where it's like, you know what? I got done the one thing I said I'd do today. And so now I can sit here and talk to AJ for a little bit. Cause like whenever we're done, like I'll just jump on my computer. There's other stuff to do, but nothing that has to get done. Right.
Mhm.
There's just a different like unlock of when you aren't so swamped with stuff.
Mhm.
And so there's a chance you're the person here who's listening and you're like, that must be nice. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. My life is just insane. It's like, I think I would just say what Dallas Willard said. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Like, I know you think it's impossible to be less busy. And there are seasons where it's impossible to be less busy. But I think most of the time we're as busy as we want to be. And
Mm.
because we are people who have some level of capacity. And here in America, with our money, with our time, with everything, we spend all the money that we get. We spend all the time that we have. Like, we just want to maximize everything,
Mm.
where it's like we don't know how to live with margin, any kind of margin. And I think starting a quest to create enough margin in your life that you can have this posture and attitude will change your life more than anything else.
Mm.
And I think it starts with Sabbath. I think it starts with carving out a day a week where there's not even a hint of work that happens, even if it means that you miss deadlines, even if it means that you don't get to go to the soccer tournament, even like whatever it means. Um, I think that's a release valve that God has put into life in the
Mm.
10 Commandments to make sure that we always have margin. I do believe if you honor the Sabbath, you will operate with margin. It just will happen. It's a byproduct of Sabbathing. And I think if you're someone who says, I just don't have the bandwidth to slow down, the first question I'd ask is, do you honor the Sabbath? And I would guess the answer is no, that's one of the 10 commandments that you've broken. And as a result, that's what happened. I mean, this is a commandment for
Mhm.
us, right?
Mhm.
That God
Mhm.
gave us to create the margin. So it's like, no, I spend every second of every day, even the, Sunday or Saturday, whatever your Sabbath is. And God's like, well, that's why you're so busy because you have no release valve, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I think, I really think finding margin in our lives is the number one thing that we can do to open up our hearts to love people with the love of God,
Mm.
because I do think hurry is the enemy of spirituality.
Yeah. really excited about the final message of this Abide series, Abide Together. And as you were talking, I was thinking like, man, what a great like training ground of this type of love to than your local church, right?
Mhm.
Than Three Crosses. And I'm thinking of the season we're in of life group launches and how do you begin to love people? Well, you have people in the club,
Mhm.
literally in the club, hopefully. We hope that most of you are Christians out there, but if not, you are tasting what the club looks like as we practice loving one another. And so,
And the great thing about the
um,
club that is Christianity,
yeah,
it's exclusive, but it's open to all.
it's open.
So it's like, just knock on the door of the clubhouse, we'll let you in.
Yeah. So we're going to have a great conversation on that. But man, this is sort of shattering a lot of thoughts that I previously had about this text. It's just bringing it to a new life. So appreciate it, Danny.
Yeah, it was great.